Welcome to Lore of the Rings, where we explore the secret paths of Middle-earth and share the stories Tolkien never told. Before we dive in, take a moment to tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from, and whether this tale has found you by day or by night. The sky above Pelennor Fields burns with ash and iron. The air trembles with the thunder of 10,000 horses, the clash of steel, the screams of dying men. Smoke curls skyward like the breath of ancient dragons, and beneath it all, the ground shakes with the weight of something older than memory, older than kingdoms, older than the very stones of Minas Tirith itself. And then silence. Not the silence of peace, no. This is the silence of dread, the kind that grips the throat and stills the heart, the kind that makes warriors freeze mid-strike, their breath caught between courage and terror. From the heart of the battlefield, a shadow rises, mounted upon a beast neither living nor dead, a fell creature born of sorcery and nightmare. Comes the witch, king of Angmar, greatest of the Nine, herald of despair. His black crown gleams with malice, his voice a thing of shattered iron and hollow wind. He speaks, and the words are not merely heard. They are felt, like ice crawling through the marrow of bone. The proclamation echoes across the battlefield like a curse woven into the very fabric of fate. For millennia, this creature has walked the earth, untouchable, undying. Kings have fallen before him. Kingdoms have been ground to dust beneath his shadow. The greatest warriors of the West have met him in battle and been broken, their swords shattering against the dark spell that shields him from mortal doom. And now, on the fields of Pelennor, with Minas Tirith's white towers crumbling behind him and the last hope of men fading like twilight, the witch king stands triumphant. The prophecy has held. No living man has hindered him. None ever will, or so it seems. But Tolkien, master of myth, architect of legend, knew something the witch king did not. He knew that prophecy is a tricky thing. It speaks in riddles. It bends around truth like light through water. And sometimes, the greatest power lies not in what is said, but in what is left unsaid. Across the field, hidden beneath helm and mail, rides a figure the prophecy never accounted for. A warrior clad in the armor of Rohan, face masked, identity concealed. The witch king sees only another rider among thousands, another mortal fool destined to fall before his inexorable wrath. He does not see her grief. He does not see her rage. He does not see the fire that burns within her heart. A fire kindled not by glory or conquest, but by despair, loneliness, and the unbearable weight of being told, again and again, that she does not belong on the battlefield. He does not see Éowyn, and that will be his undoing. Because the prophecy never said anything about a woman. It never accounted for the possibility that strength could come in a form the ancient curse makers had dismissed. It never imagined that defiance itself could take a shape they had not foreseen. The witch king's arrogance has blinded him. His certainty has become his weakness. And on this blood-soaked field, beneath a sky choked with smoke and despair, that weakness is about to be exposed. To understand why Éowyn alone could break the witch king, we must first understand who she was before the battle, before the blood, before the legend. She was born into the golden halls of Meduseld, daughter of a proud line, niece to King Thraodn. She was raised among riders and warriors, in a land where Vaela was sung in every hearth, and immortalized in every verse. The Rohirrim were a people forged in battle, their very identity woven from the thunder of hooves and the gleam of spears at dawn. But Éowyn was not permitted to ride, not to fight, not to claim the glory she knew burned within her as fiercely as in any man. She was the White Lady of Rohan, beautiful, graceful, caged. While her brother Éomer rode to war, she remained behind, tending to the wounded, managing the hall, smiling when expected, silent when commanded. Her hands, which longed to grip a sword, instead held wine goblets and healing herbs. Her heart, which yearned for the open plains and the song of battle, was forced to beat quietly in the shadows of men. Tolkien does not tell us this in grand declarations. He shows it to us in glances, in the way Éowyn watches Aragorn with desperate, aching hope. Not because she is a lovesick maiden, but because he represents everything she cannot be: freedom, purpose, a life beyond the prison of expectation. Her admiration for Aragorn is complex, layered with meanings that go far beyond simple romance. When she looks at him, she sees a life unbound by the constraints that suffocate her. She sees someone who has chosen their own path, who walks between worlds, who answers to no lord but their own conscience. She sees possibility incarnate. When she speaks to him in the halls of Adoras, her words carry the weight of a soul drowning in invisible chains. She speaks of fear, but not the fear of death or pain. No, her fear is far more insidious than that. She fears insignificance. She fears a life spent in the margins of history, watching others write the songs while she remains forever in the audience. She fears that her strength will wither unused, that her courage will die unproven, that she will fade into obscurity without ever having truly lived. This is not the fear of a coward. It is the fear of someone who knows they have greatness within them and will never be allowed to prove it. It is the despair of someone who would rather die in glory than live in obscurity. And despair, in Tolkien's world, is the most dangerous enemy of all. More dangerous than orcs or dragons or dark lords. Because despair comes from within. It eats away at the soul, turning strength into brittleness, courage into recklessness, hope into ash. Éowyn stands at the edge of that abyss throughout much of her story. She is drowning in a despair that no one around her can see, because she wears her duty like armor, her grace like a mask. But beneath it all, she is breaking. And so, when Theoden musters the Rohirrim to ride to Gondor's aid, when the call goes out for every able warrior to take up arms and face the darkness, Éowyn is told to stay behind, to rule in her uncle's absence, to remain safe. But safety, to her, is death. She understands what others do not, that there are many kinds of death. The death of the body is only one. There is also the death of the spirit, the death of purpose, the death of all that makes life worth living. And that death, she has been dying for years. In the dead of night, she makes her choice. She takes the armor of a fallen rider. She binds her golden hair beneath a steel helm. She takes the name Dernhelm and rides into the shadow of war, her identity hidden, her fate uncertain. No songs are sung for her as she departs. No oaths are sworn in her name. She rides alone, anonymous, one rider among thousands. If she falls, no one will know. If she succeeds, she will likely be punished for her disobedience. But none of that matters anymore, because within her chest, a vow burns brighter than the sun. If death comes, Let it meet me in battle. Let it find me with a sword in my hand and defiance on my lips. Let me die as I have always wished to live, free. And so she rides toward war, toward doom, toward destiny. The wind whips past her helm, carrying with it the scent of grass and horses and distant smoke. The Rohirrim sing as they ride, ancient songs of valor and sacrifice. And beneath her disguise, Éowyn's heart beats with something it has not felt in years. Not happiness, not peace. She is finally, for the first time in her life, exactly where she needs to be. And the Witch King, ancient and arrogant, does not yet know that his prophecy is about to shatter against the will of a woman who has nothing left to lose. To understand why the Witch King believed himself invincible, we must journey back. Far back, beyond the Third Age, beyond the fall of Nen Menna, into the shadowed depths of the Second Age, when Sauron walked the earth in fair form, and the rings of power were forged in fire and treachery. The Witch King was not always a wraith. Once he was a man, a king of great power and ambition, a ruler whose name has been lost to time, erased by his own corruption. When Sauron gave him one of the 9 rings, he accepted it eagerly, blind to the poison woven into its gold. The ring granted him power beyond measure. It stretched his life across centuries. It gave him dominion over armies, sorcery, fear itself. But it also devoured him. Year by year, his flesh faded, his humanity withered. His soul became bound to the will of Sauron, until there was nothing left of the man he had once been. Only a shadow, a wraith, a Nazgul. And with that transformation came a terrible gift of prophecy. The origins of the prophecy are shrouded in mystery. Some say it was spoken by Sauron himself, a curse woven into the very essence of the Witch King's being. Others believe it was whispered by darker powers still, by the lingering malice of the first Dark Lord, seeping through the cracks in the world. And some scholars of Tolkien's works suggest it was not a prophecy at all, but merely the Witch King's own arrogance given voice. Whatever its source, the words carried weight across the ages. They became more than a prediction. They became a shield, a barrier between the Witch King and the mortality he had left behind. For thousands of years, this protection held true. The Witch King carved a path of ruin across Middle-earth. He founded the kingdom of Angmar in the frozen north, a realm of terror and shadow. He waged war against the kingdoms of Arna, grinding them into dust one by one. He shattered armies, toppled thrones, and spread despair like a plague. And when warriors rose to challenge him, great kings, legendary heroes, the mightiest champions of the West, they fell. Swords broke against his shadow. Arrows turned to ash. No blade, no spell, no force of arms could pierce the veil of his protection. The wars of Angmar are remembered in fragments now, in half-forgotten songs and crumbling manuscripts. But in their time, they were the terror of the North. The Witch King's forces swept down from the frozen wastes, and wherever they marched, hope died, cities burned, bloodlines ended. The great kingdom of Arna, which had once stood as a beacon of light in the north, was broken into fragments and then destroyed utterly. And through it all, the Witch King remained untouched. Even Glorfindel, the elf, Lord of Rivendell, one of the most powerful beings in Middle-earth, refused to strike him down. When the Witch King fled after the fall of Angmar, Glorfindel spoke words that would echo through the centuries. He looked upon the fleeing shadow and saw threads of fate that others could not perceive. He counseled against pursuit. He spoke of a doom that lay far in the future, and of an end that would come from an unexpected quarter. He understood that some victories cannot be forced. Some enemies must be allowed to endure until the moment of their destined downfall arrives. Glorfindel knew. He saw the pattern, but he did not reveal how it would unfold. He left the prophecy incomplete, a riddle wrapped in shadow. And so the witch king endured. Century after century, he remained untouched, untouchable. A figure of absolute terror, shielded not by armor or magic alone, but by the weight of destiny itself. But here is the truth Tolkien understood better than any one: prophecy is not fate. It is language, and language has loopholes. Words matter in Middle-earth. They carry power. They shape reality. The whole history of Tolkien's legendarium is bound up with the power of words. From the music of the Aina that sang the world into being, to the spells woven in the elder days, to the simple act of naming that gives power over things. The Witch King's protection was forged in words, and words, for all their power, are also fragile. They mean only what they say. They cover only what they encompass. The prophecies spoke of living men, but what of those who fall outside that definition? What of women? What of hobbits? What of those who walk paths the ancient curse makers never imagined? In his pride, the Witch King had made himself invincible against one kind of enemy. But in doing so, he had left himself vulnerable to all others. He had wrapped himself in a protection that was absolute within its boundaries. But those boundaries were narrower than he realized. His arrogance had become a blindness. His certainty had become a fatal flaw. And on the fields of Pelennor, with the fate of Middle-earth hanging by a thread, that flaw would be his doom. But the Witch King does not yet know this. As he descends upon the King of Rohan, as he raises his weapon to strike the final, crushing blow, he believes himself untouchable. He believes the prophecy is absolute. He believes his millennia of invincibility will continue unbroken. He is wrong, and his mistake will cost him everything. The threads of fate are converging. The moment prophesied by Glorfindel is at hand, and the instrument of the Witch King's doom is not a mighty warrior or legendary king, but a woman driven by despair and a hobbit driven by love. Neither of them chosen by destiny. Both of them choosing, in their own way, to stand when they could have fled. Dawn breaks over Pelennor fields, but it is not the dawn of hope. The sky bleeds red and black, choked with smoke and the stench of death. The Rohirrim have charged, their horns splitting the air like the cry of eagles. And for a brief, shining moment, it seems as though courage alone might turn the tide. But courage is not enough. The forces of Mordor are endless. Orcs swarm like locusts across the broken ground. Trolls wade through the cavalry, crushing horses and riders beneath their massive fists. The Haradrim fight with desperate ferocity, their great war beasts trampling all before them. And above it all, circling like vultures, the Nazgul descend, their shrieks shattering the resolve of even the bravest warriors. And at the head of this nightmare rides the Witch King. His fell beast lands with a crash that shakes the earth. Its wings blot out the sun. Its cry is the sound of every nightmare-given voice. And astride it sits the Lord of the Nazgul, crowned in shadow, his presence a wound in the fabric of reality itself. He advances toward the white walls of Minas Tirith, unstoppable, inexorable. Defenders scatter before him. Knights fall to their knees, paralyzed by the black breath that emanates from him like a miasma. The gates have already been shattered by Grond, the great battering ram forged in the pits of Mordor. The city stands on the brink of annihilation, and then, from across the field, comes a challenge. King Éowyn of Rohan, astride his white horse Snowmane, rides to meet him. The king is old, but his heart is undimmed. His hair streams silver in the blood, red light. His voice rings out across the battlefield, clear and strong, rallying his riders one final time. He raises his sword and charges, shouting the battle cries of his ancestors, refusing to yield, refusing to despair. Around him the Rohirrim thunder forward, their courage rekindled by their king's example. But the Witch King does not even flinch. He has seen this before. Countless times across countless centuries, the brave king making his final stand, the doomed charge, the inevitable fall. It is a story he has witnessed so often that it has become meaningless to him. With a single gesture, he commands his beast to strike. The creature lunges forward, its beak opening wide, its shriek piercing the air. Snowmane rears in terror, his eyes rolling white, his body convulsing with primal fear. The great horse stumbles, crashes, falls, and King Éowyn is thrown to the ground, the full weight of his steed crushing down upon him. The king gasps, his ribs shattered, his breath fading. Blood flecks his lips, his vision blurs. But even as death reaches for him, his eyes remain clear. He has lived a good life. He has led his people well. And if this is his ending, then so be it. The Witch King approaches, slow and deliberate. He savors these moments, the final gasps of dying kings. The realization that dawns in their eyes when they understand that all their valor, all their nobility, all their courage has come to nothing. He raises his weapon, a mace forged in the fires of Morgul, steeped in sorcery and malice, a thing that has ended the lives of kings and heroes beyond count. He looms over the fallen Éowyn, a shadow within shadow, death incarnate, and he speaks. His voice is the sound of iron scraping over stone, of winter wind through dead trees, of all hope dying. But before he can strike, a voice answers. Cold, clear, defiant. The words cut through the chaos of battle like a blade through silk. The Witch King pauses, turns. And for the first time in millennia, something shifts within the hollow void where his soul once lived. Standing between him and the fallen king is a figure clad in the armor of Rohan. For a heartbeat, he sees only another rider, another obstacle to be crushed, another mortal fool who does not understand the futility of resistance. And then the helm is torn away. Golden hair spills free, catching the blood, red light of the burning sky. A woman stands before him, sword in hand, shield raised, eyes blazing with a fury that has been caged for far too long. Éowyn, the Witch King pauses. For the first time in his ancient existence, something resembling confusion flickers through his consciousness. Not fear, he is beyond fear. Not concern, he is beyond doubt. But recognition, understanding, the prophecy has turned. The riddle has been answered, but it is too late. Éowyn does not wait. She does not hesitate. All the years of suppressed rage, all the months of despair, all the bitter hours spent watching others ride to glory while she remained behind. All of it erupts in a single, focused moment of absolute defiance. She charges. The Witch King swings his mace, a blow that would shatter stone. But Éowyn is faster, fiercer, driven by something beyond mere physical strength. She ducks beneath the strike, pivots, and brings her sword down upon the neck of the fell beast. Her blade bites deep. The creature shrieks, not the cry of triumph it usually makes, but a sound of genuine pain and shock. It thrashes, its wings beating wildly, and then collapses, its neck nearly severed, black blood pooling beneath its massive body. The Witch King rises from the wreckage, towering over her. Without his beast, he is somehow even more terrifying. He is tall beyond the height of mortal men, wrapped in robes of shadow, crowned with iron and malice. His presence radiates cold that has nothing to do with temperature. It is the cold of the void, of spaces between stars, of death itself. He lifts his blade, a weapon forged in ages past, steeped in dark sorcery, a thing designed to slay both body and spirit. But Éowyn does not retreat. She stands her ground, shield raised, sword ready. Her arm trembles with exhaustion. Her body screams for her to flee. But she does not move. She has come too far, sacrificed too much, and she will not, cannot, back down now. The Witch King strikes. His blade crashes against her shield with a force that sends shockwaves through her body. The shield shatters, its pieces falling away like leaves. Her arm goes numb, the bone cracked, agony lancing up to her shoulder. But she does not fall. And then, from behind the Witch King, a small figure moves. Meriadoc Brandybuck, Merry, the Hobbit, barely 4 feet tall, insignificant in the eyes of the Witch King, crawls forward through the mud and blood. In his hand is a blade given to him by Tom Bombadil, a weapon forged long ago in the ancient kingdom of Arna, specifically designed to fight the servants of the Witch King. With the last of his strength, trembling with fear and pain and determination, Mary drives the blade into the back of the Witch King's knee. The effect is instantaneous and catastrophic. The Witch King staggers. His shriek is not one of pain. Wraiths are beyond such mortal sensations, but of shock and disbelief. The spell binding him to his immortal form cracks. The ancient sorcery that has protected him for millennia begins to unravel. For the first time in thousands of years, the Witch King is vulnerable. And in that moment of weakness, Éowyn strikes. She drives her sword upward into the void where the Witch King's face should be. Light flares, clean, pure, terrible in its intensity. Shadow screams. The crown of iron falls empty, clattering onto the blood-soaked earth. The Witch King's form collapses inward, imploding, his robes falling empty to the ground. His voice, his presence, his ancient malice, all of it dissipates like smoke in the wind, and then silence. The Witch King is no more. Éowyn collapses, her sword falling from her hand. Her arm is blackened from contact with the dark sorcery that clung to the Nazgul like a shroud. The black breath fills her lungs, cold and invasive, seeping into her very soul. She lies beside her fallen king, barely breathing, her eyes staring up at the smoke-choked sky. But she has won. The prophecy is broken. The greatest of the Nazgul has fallen. Not to a king, not to a legendary warrior, not to the mightiest heroes of the age, but to a woman who refused to be left behind, and a hobbit who refused to let his friend fight alone. Around them, the battle rages on, but something has changed. The tide has turned. Where the Witch King's presence brought despair, his absence brings hope. The Rohirrim fight with renewed vigor. The forces of Mordor waver. And on the blood-soaked fields of Pelennor, two small figures lie still, their impossible victory complete. Victory on Pelennor fields comes at a terrible cost. Éowyn survives the battle, but only barely. When Aragorn and the healers of Gondor find her among the dead and dying, she is cold as death itself, her skin pale as snow, her breathing so shallow it barely stirs the air. The black breath of the Nazgul has seeped into her very soul, a poison more insidious than any venom, more cruel than any wound of steel. She is carried to the houses of healing in Minas Tirith, laid upon clean white sheets in a room filled with sunlight. But the sunlight does not warm her. The darkness within her is not of the body, it is of the spirit. And no amount of light from without can chase away shadows that dwell within. The greatest physicians of Gondor work through the night to save her. They apply poultices and salves. They speak healing words in languages older than kingdoms. But their herbs and incantations do little. The malady that grips her goes deeper than their arts can reach. Aragorn comes to her bedside. He is not yet crowned king, but already the light of his ancestors stirs within him. The ancient healing power of the Dítni Dane runs in his blood, passed down through generations from the mighty kings of Nan Menna. He calls for Athelas, King Sfoil, the healing herb that most dismiss as a weed, but which in the hands of the true king carries power beyond the understanding of common healers. He crushes the leaves in boiling water, and the scent fills the room. It is sharp and clean, cutting through the miasma of despair that clings to Éowyn like a shroud. He speaks words in the old tongue, calling her back from the darkness, urging her spirit to return to her body. Slowly, painfully, Éowyn begins to breathe more easily. Color returns to her cheeks, faint but real. Her eyelids flutter. Her fingers twitch. But when she wakes, something in her eyes has changed. Gandalf stands beside Aragorn, his expression grave. He has seen this before, though not often. He knows what it means to strike down one of the Nazgul. He knows what it costs. He speaks quietly, so that only Aragorn can hear. Few could survive what she has endured, he says. The black breath does not merely afflict the body. It feeds on despair, on sorrow, on the weight of unfulfilled longing. That she lives at all is a testament to her extraordinary strength. But the shadow will linger. It always does. And he is right. In the days that follow, as Éowyn slowly recovers in the gardens of the houses of healing, she is haunted, not by the memory of battle. That she can endure. Not by the pain of her wounds. That she can bear. Warriors carry such burdens, and she has proven herself a warrior beyond question. No, what haunts her is the presence. When she closes her eyes, she sees the Pelennor fields ablaze. She hears the shriek of the fell beast. She feels the cold, hollow gaze of the Witch King boring into her soul. And sometimes, in the deepest hours of the night when the city sleeps and the stars wheel cold overhead, she hears a voice, a whisper, faint, distant, but unmistakable. It speaks to her in dreams. It tells her that what she destroyed was never truly alive, and therefore can never truly die. It reminds her that she touched darkness, and darkness always leaves a mark. It is not the Witch King speaking. He is gone, destroyed, his essence scattered into the void. But something remains. Some fragment of his malice, some echo of his ancient sorcery, clinging to her like a shadow she cannot shake. Aragorn and Gandalf speak of this in hushed tones. The Witch King was the greatest of the Nazgul, bound by sorcery older than the kingdoms of men. His destruction was absolute, but sorcery does not die easily. It seeps, it lingers, and in those who strike it down, it sometimes leaves an imprint. Éowyn, for all her courage, for all her strength, has been touched by that darkness. She has looked into the abyss, and the abyss has looked back. And though her body heals, her spirit remains scarred in ways that herbs and healing hands cannot mend. The other healers do not understand. They see her strength returning, see color in her cheeks and steadiness in her limbs, and they believe she is recovering. But Gandalf knows better. He sees the shadow in her eyes. He recognizes the look of someone who has walked too close to the edge of the void. But she is not alone. One day, as she sits in the garden, staring out over the walls of Minas Tirith toward the distant mountains, a voice speaks beside her. She turns. Faramir, son of Denethor, stands there. Like her, he has been wounded. Like her, he has felt the black breath seeping into his soul. Like her, he has walked through fire and shadow and emerged on the other side. Changed, but not broken, he sits beside her, and for a long while, they say nothing. They do not need to. They understand each other in a way few others can. They have both stared into the face of death and despair. They have both been touched by darkness, and they have both survived. And slowly, day by day, Éowyn begins to heal. Not because the shadow leaves her. It does not. It never truly will. But because she learns to carry it, to accept it, to transform it into something else. She learns that courage is not the absence of fear or despair. It is the choice to keep living in spite of them. It is the decision to wake each morning and face another day, even when darkness whispers that there is no point. And in Faramir, she finds something she never expected. Not glory, not battle, not the wild freedom of the open plains, but peace, understanding, a quiet strength that does not need to prove itself through violence. Still, on quiet nights, when the wind howls across the fields of Rohan and the stars gleam cold and distant, Éowyn sometimes wakes with a start. And for just a moment, she hears it again. The faint, far-off cry of a Nazgul echoing through the corridors of memory. But she no longer trembles at the sound. She no longer fears it. Because she knows the truth now. The darkness may linger. The shadow may remain. The memory of what she faced may never fully fade. But it has no power over her. Not anymore. She has looked into the abyss and struck it down. She has touched darkness and survived. And if shadows sometimes whisper in her dreams, well, she has learned that even shadows must eventually yield to the light of morning. Tolkien was a master of battles and dragons and the clash of swords beneath burning skies. His tales are filled with heroic deeds and legendary warriors, with the rise and fall of kingdoms, with the great sweep of history unfolding across ages. But his true genius, the thing that elevates his work from mere fantasy into myth, is this. He understood that the greatest battles are not fought on the field. They are fought within the heart. Éowyn's journey does not end with the death of the Witch King. In many ways, it only begins there, because the real enemy she faced was never the Lord of the Nazgul. It was despair, from the very beginning. Éowyn was not driven by a desire for glory or fame. She was driven by a desperate, aching need to matter. To prove that her life had meaning. To escape the suffocating cage of expectation and obscurity that had imprisoned her since birth. She looked at Aragorn and saw everything she wanted to be. A warrior, a wanderer, someone who walked their own path and answered to no lord but their own conscience. She offered him her heart, yes, but what she truly offered was herself, her courage, her fire, her potential. She wanted him to see her as she truly was, not as the world had defined her. She wanted validation, recognition, proof that she was more than just the White Lady of Rohan, more than just a piece of decoration in the Golden Hall. And when he gently refused, when he told her that his heart belonged to another, it was not rejection she felt. It was confirmation of her deepest fear, that she would never be enough. That no matter how hard she fought, she would always be invisible. That her strength and courage would wither unused, and she would fade into obscurity without ever having truly lived. So she rode to war not to win. She rode to die. This is what Tolkien makes heartbreakingly clear in his writing. Éowyn did not seek glory. She sought escape. She wanted a death that would be remembered, because she could not bear a life that would be forgotten. She wanted to die on her feet with a sword in her hand, because that seemed preferable to living on her knees with nothing but empty duties and hollow praise. Her death wish was not born of cowardice. It was born of despair so profound that oblivion seemed like mercy. But then, something extraordinary happened. She killed the Witch King. She shattered prophecy. She became legend. And yet, in the aftermath, lying in the houses of healing with her arm blackened and her spirit broken, she realized something that shook her to her core. Dying in glory would have been easier than living in pain. True courage, she discovered, was not charging into battle with a sword in hand. It was waking up each morning and choosing to keep going. It was facing the emptiness within herself and refusing to let it consume her. It was living when death would have been simpler. This is the transformation that makes Éowyn's story so profound. She goes to war seeking death and glory. She finds both. And then she discovers that neither one is the answer to the question burning in her heart. And this is where Faramir enters her story. Faramir is in many ways Éowyn's mirror. Like her, he has been overlooked. Like her, he has longed for recognition from those he loves. His father, Denethor, despised him, favoring his older brother Boromir and seeing Faramir as weak, unworthy, a disappointment. No matter what Faramir achieved, it was never enough. He was always compared to his brother and found wanting. But where Éowyn's pain turned into a desperate need to prove herself through death, Faramir's pain turned into wisdom. He learned, slowly and painfully, to find value not in the approval of others, but in the quiet strength of his own heart. He learned to measure his worth, not by the songs others sang, but by the good he could do when no one was watching. When Éowyn meets him in the gardens of Minas Tirith, she is still drowning. She is still searching for purpose. She has achieved the glory she sought, but it has left her empty. She has proven her courage beyond any doubt, but it has not healed the wound within her soul. And Faramir does not offer her grand declarations or heroic proclamations. He does not try to be Aragorn, the legendary warrior she thought she wanted. Instead, he offers her something far more precious: understanding, He tells her, gently, that she does not need to be a warrior to have worth. That laying down the sword is not surrender. It is transformation. That the truest battle is not against enemies of flesh and shadow, but against the darkness within. He does not diminish her achievements. He does not tell her that her warrior spirit was wrong or misguided. Instead, he helps her see that her strength can take many forms, that there is as much courage in healing as in fighting, that peace is not weakness, but the hardest, one victory of all. And slowly, painfully, Éowyn begins to believe him. She does not stop being fierce. She does not stop being strong. But she learns that strength has many faces. That the sword she laid down was not her identity, but only one expression of it. That she can be both the warrior who slew the witch, king, and the woman who chooses to cultivate gardens instead of graveyards. In one of the most beautiful transformations Tolkien ever wrote, Éowyn speaks words that mark her true victory. Not over the witch king, but over the despair that had nearly destroyed her from within. She tells Faramir that she will be a shield maiden no longer, that she will not take joy only in the songs of battle, that she will be a healer and love all things that grow and are not barren. This is not defeat. This is transcendence. Éowyn does not reject her warrior self. She integrates it. She becomes whole. She learns that she can be both fierce and gentle, both strong and vulnerable, both a legend and a woman at peace. And in Faramir, she finds not the hero she thought she wanted, but the partner she truly needed. Someone who sees her not as a symbol or a prize, but as a person. Someone who understands her pain because he has felt it himself. Someone who loves her not for her legend, but for her humanity. Their union is not a fairy tale romance. It is two wounded people choosing to heal together. It is love forged not in grand gestures, but in quiet moments of understanding. It is the recognition that sometimes the greatest courage is in allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to be seen, to be known. And in the end, it is this love. Not the slaying of the Witch King, not the breaking of prophecy, that truly saves her. Because Tolkien knew something the world often forgets: courage is not only in battle. It is in choosing life after darkness. It is in waking up when you would rather sleep. It is in loving when you have been broken. It is in cultivating hope in the aftermath of despair. And Éowyn, the woman who faced death and did not flinch, learned at last the hardest truth of all, that living takes more courage than dying ever did. Years pass. The War of the Ring becomes memory, then story, then legend. The Shire is rebuilt, its green hills peaceful once more. Gondor rises from the ruins, its white towers gleaming under the sun. Rohan thrives beneath the open sky, its riders singing the old songs with new joy. The age of elves fades like twilight, and the age of men begins in earnest, full of promise and uncertainty. And in the halls and hearths of Middle-earth, songs are sung. Songs of Aragorn, the king who returned from the wild to reclaim his throne. Of Frodo, the ring-bearer who carried an impossible burden to the very fires of Mount Doom. Of Gandalf, the wizard who fell into shadow and rose again clothed in white. Of Legolas and Gimli, whose friendship bridged the ancient divide between elf and dwarf. Of Sam, the gardener whose loyalty never wavered. Of all the fellowship, and of the countless others who stood against the darkness when it seemed all hope was lost. But there is one song that is sung with a different kind of reverence. A song that is not about kings or wizards or the grand sweep of destiny, but about something more intimate, more personal, more achingly human. It is sung in the golden halls of Meduseld, where riders gather at dusk and mead flows like rivers. It is sung in the quiet villages of Gondor, where healers tend their gardens and mothers tell their daughters stories of courage. It is sung in the Shire, where hobbits huddle by the fire and marvel at the strange and wonderful deeds of the big folk. It is sung by traveling minstrels who wander from town to town, carrying tales of the war and its heroes. They call it the Song of the White Lady of Rohan. The legend grows with each telling, as legends do. Some versions emphasize the prophecy, the clever twist of fate that undid the Witch King's arrogance. Others focus on Éowyn's courage, her refusal to be left behind, her willingness to stand alone against the greatest terror of the age. Still others speak of the partnership between the woman and the hobbit, two unlikely heroes who together accomplished what all the mighty warriors of the West could not. In Rohan, Éowyn's name becomes a battle cry. Riders shout it as they charge into combat, invoking her courage, her defiance, her unbreakable will. Young girls grow up hearing stories of her, and when they are told they cannot ride or fight or lead, they whisper her name to themselves and hold their heads high. She becomes a symbol, not just of female courage, though she is certainly that, but of something broader, something that resonates with anyone who has ever felt invisible or overlooked or trapped by the expectations of others. She represents the possibility that you can break free from the roles assigned to you, that you can defy prophecy, tradition, and expectation, that you can become more than the world believes you capable of being. In Gondor, scholars debate the meaning of her story. Some write learned treatises on the nature of prophecy and how her victory reveals its limitations. Others explore the metaphysical implications of destroying one of the Nazgul. Still others focus on the healing that came after, on her transformation from warrior to healer, on what her choice to lay down the sword teaches about the nature of courage and peace. But perhaps the truest understanding of Éowyn's legacy can be found not in scholarly texts or grand songs, but in the quiet ways her story changes individual lives. A young woman in a remote village, told she must marry and bear children, and never dream of anything more, hears the tale of Éowyn and finds the courage to choose her own path. A soldier, returning from war with wounds both visible and invisible, hears how Éowyn carried her shadow and learned to live with it, and finds hope that he too might heal. A leader facing an impossible decision remembers that Éowyn stood alone on the field of battle and did not waver, and finds the strength to do what must be done. This is the power of legend, not in the grand proclamations or the perfect retellings, but in the way a story can reach across time and space to touch someone when they need it most. In Ithilien, where Éowyn and Faramir make their home, the land itself seems to respond to their presence. The forests grow green and vibrant. The rivers run clear and clean. The shadow of Mordor, which had poisoned the land for so long, gradually recedes. Under their care, Ithilien becomes a garden, a place of healing and growth. Éowyn plants trees. She tends flowers. She welcomes travelers and offers them rest. She teaches children to read and tends to the sick. She does all the quiet. unglamorous work that actually holds a community together. And sometimes, visitors come seeking the legendary warrior who slew the Witch King. They expect to find someone fierce and battle, hardened, someone who lives only for war and glory. Instead, they find a woman with gentle hands and a kind smile, who offers them bread and listens to their troubles and sends them away, feeling somehow lighter than when they arrived. Some are disappointed. They wanted the legend, not the person. But others understand. They see that Éowyn's greatest victory was not on the battlefield, but here, in choosing life and love and growth over the seductive simplicity of glorious death. But even in peace, even in the quiet beauty of Ithilien, there are nights when Éowyn stands at her window and gazes eastward, toward the distant plains where once she rode to war. And sometimes, when the wind is right and the moon hangs cold and silver in the sky, she remembers. She remembers the weight of the helm concealing her identity, the thunder of hooves on the Pelennor, the moment she tore away her disguise and declared herself. The cold void where the witch, King's face should have been, the shattering of her shield, the moment her blade struck true. She remembers all of it, and she does not regret it, because that moment, that single, shining moment of absolute defiance, was when she became fully herself, when she stopped being who others expected her to be and started being who she truly was. The shadow still lingers. On some nights, she still hears the faint cry of the Nazgul in her dreams. But she does not fear it anymore. She has learned to carry her darkness, to acknowledge it without being controlled by it, to remember without being consumed by memory. And in the end, perhaps that is the truest measure of victory. Not to emerge unscathed, but to emerge whole despite the scars. As the years turn into decades, as her hair turns silver and her hands grow gentle with age, the legend of Éowyn becomes something more than history. It becomes myth. It becomes a story that parents tell their children, that teachers share with their students, that travelers carry from one corner of Middle Earth to another. And in every telling, the core truth remains that sometimes the greatest victories are won not by the strongest or the mightiest, but by those who refuse to yield, by those who stand when everyone else has fallen, by those who look at prophecy and doom and death itself and say simply, clearly, defiantly no. Long after the War of the Ring, after the last of the Fellowship has passed from Middle-earth, after the very memory of those days has faded into the distant past, the story of Éowyn endures. It endures because it speaks to something fundamental in the human experience. The struggle to be seen, the fight to be heard, the desperate need to prove that your life matters, that you have value beyond the narrow roles society assigns you. Tolkien created many heroes in his legendarium. Great kings and powerful wizards, noble elves and stalwart dwarves, brave hobbits who carried the fate of the world on their shoulders. Each of them resonates with readers for different reasons. Each of them represents some aspect of courage or wisdom or sacrifice. But Éowyn stands apart. She is not the chosen one. She is not destined for greatness by prophecy or bloodline. She does not possess magical powers or ancient weapons. She is not even supposed to be on the battlefield. Everything about her story is contingent, uncertain, born of choice rather than destiny. And that is precisely what makes her so powerful, because most of us are not chosen ones. Most of us do not have prophecies foretelling our greatness. Most of us wake up each day wondering if our lives matter, if anyone would notice if we disappeared, if we have any real purpose beyond the mundane routines that fill our hours. Éowyn speaks to that uncertainty. She speaks to the fear that you are wasting your potential. She speaks to the despair of feeling trapped in roles that don't fit. She speaks to the aching desire to prove yourself, to be recognized, to matter. But she also speaks to something deeper. Because her story does not end with the slaying of the witch king. It does not end with the moment of glory that she sought. It continues into the aftermath, into the difficult work of healing and living and finding new purpose. And that is where her story becomes truly profound. In our modern world, we are obsessed with the dramatic moment, the grand gesture, the heroic climax. We celebrate the warrior charging into battle, the revolutionary storming the barricades, the inventor making the breakthrough discovery. But Éowyn's story reminds us that life continues after the dramatic moment, that the real work of living happens in the quiet times, in the days and months and years that follow. That sometimes the greatest courage is not in the spectacular act, but in the mundane choice to keep going. Travelers passing through what was once Ithilien, in the years and centuries after Éowyn's death, sometimes report strange encounters. They speak of seeing a woman in white riding across the hills at twilight. They tell stories of being lost in the wild and finding a light that leads them to safety. They whisper of hearing a voice on the wind, offering comfort or counsel in moments of despair. Are these stories true? Do they reflect some genuine presence? Some echo of Éowyn that lingers in the land she helped heal? Or are they simply the way people make sense of the world, attributing fortunate coincidences to the intervention of legendary figures? Perhaps it does not matter. Because the truth of a legend is not in its historical accuracy. It is in what the legend means to those who tell it. It is in how the story shapes the choices people make, the courage they find, the hope they carry. When a young woman facing an impossible situation remembers Éowyn's story and finds the strength to stand her ground, Éowyn lives. When a warrior returns from battle carrying invisible wounds and remembers that Éowyn bore her darkness and still found peace, Éowyn lives. When anyone, anywhere, looks at the roles they have been assigned and says, "No, I am more than this," Éowyn lives. This is the immortality that matters. Not in ghostly apparitions or miraculous interventions, but in the way a story can reach across centuries to touch a heart when it needs touching most. Tolkien understood this. He was a scholar of ancient myths and legends, a student of the old stories that have shaped human consciousness for millennia. He knew that the most powerful tales are not just entertainment. They are maps of the human soul. They are guides through darkness. They are proof that others have walked difficult paths before us and survived. Éowyn's story is one of those tales. It carries within it truths that transcend the specific details of Middle-earth. It speaks to struggles that remain relevant regardless of whether we live in a world of magic and dragons or a world of technology and cities. The struggle to be seen, the fight against despair, the search for purpose, the choice between glory and peace, the work of healing after trauma, the courage to keep living when dying would be easier. These are universal human experiences. and Éowyn's story illuminates them with a clarity and power that few fictional characters achieve. In the centuries after the War of the Ring, as Middle-earth transforms and changes, as the old magic fades and the world becomes more familiar and mundane, the story of Éowyn adapts and evolves with each retelling. Some versions emphasize different aspects. Some add embellishments. Some strip away the historical details and focus on the mythic core. But through all the variations, certain elements remain constant. A woman who refused to be left behind. A prophecy that was broken by courage and cleverness. A victory that came at a cost. A healing that took longer than the wounding. A choice to embrace life over death, growth over glory, peace over endless war. These elements persist because they are true. Not historically true, perhaps. Éowyn is, after all, a fictional character in a fantasy epic, but true in a deeper sense. True to the human experience. True to the way courage actually works in the real world. Because real courage is not usually about grand gestures. It is about the thousand small choices we make each day. The choice to get out of bed when depression whispers that there is no point. The choice to speak up when silence would be easier. The choice to help someone when no one is watching. The choice to hope when despair seems more reasonable. Éowyn's story encompasses all of this. Her grand moment of glory on the battlefield is important, yes, but no more important than her slow healing in the gardens of Gondor. Her defiance of prophecy matters, but so does her acceptance of peace. Her warrior courage is admirable, but so is her vulnerability in allowing herself to be loved. She is whole, she is complex, she is real. And that is why, of all the characters in Tolkien's vast legendarium, she may be the one who resonates most deeply with modern readers. She is not distant and perfect like Aragorn. She is not innocent and pure like Frodo. She is not comic relief like Merry and Pippin or mystic wisdom like Gandalf. She is wounded and angry and desperate. She makes choices born of pain rather than nobility. She seeks death before she learns to embrace life. She is, in short, deeply and recognizably human. And in the end, she finds her way through. Not easily, not without cost, not without scars that will last her entire life. But she finds her way, and in doing so, she lights a path for everyone who comes after. A path through despair to purpose, through pain to healing, through the desperate need for glory to the quiet acceptance of peace. This is the gift Éowyn gives us. Not a blueprint for how to live, but a reminder that it is possible to survive the darkness, that wounds can heal even when they leave scars, that you can be broken and still become whole, that you can face death and choose life, that you can be a warrior and a healer, strong and gentle, fierce and at peace, that you can be all of who you are, without apology, without shame. And that, perhaps, is the greatest victory of all. As the ages turn and the world continues its inexorable march from the mythic past into the mundane present, as the magic fades and the old stories become legends and the legends become fairy tales, one truth remains constant: courage matters. Not because it always leads to victory, not because it guarantees success, but because it is the choice to stand when falling would be easier. The choice to act when inaction would be safer. The choice to hope when despair seems more rational. Éowyn understood this. Perhaps not at first, when she rode to war seeking death and glory. But she learned it, painfully, In the aftermath of her great victory, she learned that courage is not one grand moment, but a lifetime of smaller choices. Each day you choose to live is an act of courage. Each time you extend kindness, when cruelty would be simpler, is an act of defiance against the darkness. The witch, king of Angmar, for all his ancient power and terrible might, could not understand this. He had long since forgotten what it meant to be human, to struggle, to choose. He was a creature of inevitability, bound by prophecy, wrapped in the certainty of his own invincibility, and that certainty destroyed him, because he could not imagine that anyone outside the narrow categories of his understanding could pose a threat. He could not conceive that a woman, dismissed and overlooked by the very society she fought to protect, could be the instrument of his doom. He could not fathom that a hobbit, smallest and seemingly weakest of all the free peoples, could play a crucial role in his destruction. His failure of imagination became his downfall. Éowyn and Merry, the woman and the hobbit, represented everything the witch, king's power structure could not account for. They were the outliers, the exceptions, the ones who slipped through the cracks in prophecy and fate. And together, they accomplished what all the great warriors and mighty kings could not. This is what makes their victory so satisfying, so right. It is not just that the witch, king, was defeated. It is that he was defeated by those he would have considered beneath his notice. His arrogance, his dismissal of those who did not fit his narrow definition of threat, became the weapon that destroyed him. There is a lesson in this for all of us, not just in grand military or political terms, but in the everyday ways we move through the world. How often do we dismiss people because they do not fit our expectations? How often do we overlook potential allies or underestimate opponents because they do not match our preconceptions? How often does our certainty about how the world works blind us to possibilities we never imagined? The witch, king's downfall, was not ultimately about gender or size or any specific characteristic. It was about the dangers of absolute certainty. The blindness that comes from wrapping yourself in prophecy and never questioning whether your understanding might be incomplete. Tolkien, writing in the middle of the 20th century, had seen firsthand how certainty could lead to catastrophe. He had lived through 2 world wars. He had watched ideologies that claimed absolute truth lead millions to their deaths. He understood the danger of systems that could not accommodate complexity or exception. And so he wrote a story where the great evil, for all its power, fell because it could not imagine anything outside its own rigid understanding of the world. Meanwhile, the heroes, the ragtag fellowship of different races and backgrounds, the ranger who became king, the hobbits who carried the ring, the woman who defied tradition, the wizard who returned from death, succeeded precisely because they embraced complexity and exception, because they were willing to question assumptions, because they understood that truth is often stranger and more wonderful than prophecy. As we stand now, looking back across the vast expanse of Tolkien's mythology, Éowyn's story shines with particular brilliance, not because it is the most dramatic, though the moment when she strikes down the witch, king, is certainly dramatic, not because it is the most tragic, though her despair and slow healing carry real emotional weight, but because it feels true. true to the way courage actually works in the real world, true to the way healing happens, slowly, painfully, imperfectly, true to the way we struggle to find our place and purpose, true to the way the greatest victories are often won by those who were never supposed to be on the battlefield in the first place. Tolkien gave us many gifts in his writing. He gave us a fully realized world with its own languages, histories, and mythologies. He gave us characters we could love and villains we could fear. He gave us adventure and wonder and beauty. But perhaps his greatest gift was this. He gave us mirrors in which we could see ourselves, not as we wish we were, but as we actually are. Flawed, struggling, uncertain, but capable of extraordinary courage when circumstances demand it. Éowyn is one of those mirrors. When we look at her, we see our own struggles reflected back at us, our own desperate need to matter, our own fight against despair, our own search for purpose and meaning in a world that often seems indifferent to our existence. And we see that it is possible to survive, to endure, to triumph, even when triumph looks nothing like we expected. The prophecy said, no living man could hinder the Witch King. And for thousands of years, that prophecy held true. It shaped reality, or seemed to. It gave the Witch King an aura of invincibility that broke the courage of countless warriors before a single blow was struck. But the prophecy was not absolute. It was language, and language has limits. It covered what it covered and nothing more. And in the end, in a woman's hand, in a hobbit's loyalty, in two hearts that refused to yield, the doom of the greatest of the ringwraiths was written, not because it was destined, not because fate demanded it, but because two people made choices. Moment by moment, step by step, they chose courage over fear, action over paralysis, hope over despair. And in those choices, they changed the world. This is the power that lies within each of us. Not the power to wield swords, or cast spells, or command armies, but the power to choose, to stand when we could fall, to speak when we could be silent, to act when we could hide. The power to look at prophecy and fate and doom itself and say no, not today, not while I still draw breath. This is what Éowyn teaches us. This is her legacy, more valuable than all the songs sung in her honor, more enduring than any monument of stone, that even in darkness, even when all hope seems lost, even when prophecy itself declares victory impossible, courage can still rise, and in the hands of those the world dismissed, in the hearts of those the prophecy forgot, the doom of kings may fall. Dear listener, this story ends, but many await. Subscribe so no tale escapes you.